So you want to be holding in this week's Torah portion? Of course you do. Here are your Shpark Notes. Parashat Chayei Sarah. Our parasha this week is called The Life of Sarah. So what better way to start things off than with the death of Sarah? Sarah dies at the age of 127, and according to our commentators, according to the Midrash, she dies because she is grief-stricken by the shenanigans that took place in last week's Torah portion on Har Moriah on Mount Moriah. Turns out attempted child sacrifice can really challenge a family's cohesiveness. Who knew? Abraham is bummed, of course, so he chooses to honor Sarah with a VIP burial plot. Not tucked away into the corner of the cemetery next to the highway. No, this has to be right in the middle with some nice shade, a bench, and some serious gravitas. And so he buys a beautiful spot. Now, had he known that this spot would one day become modern-day Hebron, he probably would have rethought that location. But, alas. Now, all of this end-of-life tachlis gets Abraham thinking about his own legacy, and so he decides to call up his servant, and he says, "Put your hand on my thigh, I have some really important information I want to tell you." And I like to imagine that there is not actually any ancient cultural significance to this that we just don't know about anymore, but that he just awkwardly asks his servant to put his hand on his leg for the conversation. It's just funnier that way. But sure enough, the servant grabs some leg, and Abraham tells him about his plans for Isaac. Isaac needs to be married off to someone back in the Alter Haim, back in the homeland. But here's the tricky part. That person also needs to come back to Canaan. The servant asks, well, if she wants to stay back in your hometown, should I just say that's okay? And Abraham is like, God, no. I refuse to have my grandchildren be townies. So the servant sets out to find Isaac a wife. He pulls up to Abraham's old stomping grounds, and he is parched. And so the servant prays to Hashem, if any of these ladies pours me a glass of water, then I will take that as a sign that that person is meant to be Isaac's wife. Interesting bar to set, but okay. Sure enough, Rebecca strolls down to the well with her jar on her shoulder, and the servant runs up to her and asks if he can have some water. And Rebecca, being a person of basic human decency, says, sure. The servant's mind is blown, and he's like, I cannot believe this. What are the odds? This is beshert. The stars now aligned. Abraham's servant fills out all the relevant paperwork with Rebecca and her father Lavan, and they get things signed and notarized and ready to go. The servant takes Rebecca with him back to the Aretz, and as they're pulling up to the land, they see Isaac strolling around in the field deep in thought, and Rebecca says to the servant, who is that hottie strolling so pensive and thoughtful in the field? And he says, that's your husband. And then she swoons. And Isaac is equally smitten, and despite the servant's questionable approach to matchmaking, he really hits this one out of the park. The servant is very pleased with himself, and he becomes a full-time shadchan in Beverly Hills, and some people even say that he's the one who introduced Sarah Jessica Parker and Matthew Broderick. I don't know if it's true, but that's what people say. With love in the air, Abraham feels inspired, and so he golden bachelors it and marries a woman named Keturah. They end up having a bunch of babies, none of whom as successful or as famous as the OGs as Isaac and Ishmael. And then Abraham dies, and it's up to Isaac to pick up his father's legacy. Does he do it? Yes. Pretty much word for word, action for action, footstep for footstep, well for well. But we will talk about that more next week, because this was Parashat Chayei Sarah, and these were your Shpark Notes. The rest is commentary. Go and learn.